2025 was a huge year for Skyward. It launched in June of this year, and we have had such a fantastic time with several guests and several different conversations that led us to some amazing advice. So with that, welcome back to Skyward, the podcast that brings you behind the scenes of the aviation and aerospace industry. I am your host, Pilot Mercedes, and today we are going over the 2025 best advice that we've been given throughout this year.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seat and fasten your seatbelts. Thank you.
What is some guidance you would offer to someone aiming to succeed in the same aviation career path as yourself?
Mm-hmm. So this is another one where I had a few points because I think it's just, it's kind of multifaceted. It's hard to know exactly like this. There's no one technique or one way to do anything. Like, you know,
every as we've said, every person's path is different.
And everybody,
if there's any key points that you can think about, because it's hard.
Every endpoint or every person's place where they want to end up is different. So I think there's no way to say like this is the guidance. But for me personally, I think the overarching points are just having a growth mindset. Like I talked about, always be willing to learn and never like, you know, there's feedback that's like, it's about like, I think separating yourself as a pilot or as like a person to a pilot, I guess, in a way that when you're getting feedback, it's in a way that's designed to help you become a better pilot. And so if you learn to just accept that for what it is, and maybe there's some that's, you know, a little more harsh than others, and so you try to filter that in a way that you can, but to just be understanding that there's always a way to continue to be better and to learn. I think that's just a really great way to do to kind of go about succeeding, especially if you want to kind of work in aviation. I think having a positive attitude when people are going through their sim evaluations to kind of go to work. I was just say they're going to teach you how to fly whatever airplane you're going to be on, but you need to show up as a person that will succeed, right? You need to show up with a positive attitude, be willing to work with another person, be willing to have like to learn and to have those good communication skills. So, you know, they can teach you how to fly the plane, but you have to kind of show up and be the good person as well. There's a responsibility there for you too. And just kind of be willing to put in that hard work. You know, there's lots of late nights of studying and maybe missing out on things that you didn't really want to miss out on, but it's like to kind of dig deep and still remembering that you're a human first, but also just, you know, there's hard work that's needed there too. So and then just setting personal limitations. Like if you're not comfortable with something, then being able to say, you know, that crosswind's a little too high for me. I said this yesterday. There was a crosswind that was kind of at the limit, but it was just inside. Okay. And I was like, no, that's just something that I'm not as comfortable with. And so if the captain could take control, and if you don't mind if I could shadow the controls, I'd really appreciate that. And so to have those personal limitations, I think is really helpful. To be adaptable to different situations, like we talked about COVID, or there's different things that come up that you can't control, and there's things that come up that you can't control, but to be able to be adaptable. I think to trust yourself too, like we talked about, imposter syndrome is hard to combat. I think networking is really important. Any way you can kind of go to those opportunities and meet who you can and stay in touch and ask those questions. I think that's been really helpful for me. And then looking for opportunities. Aviation is a place where you can work and where you can fly, but there's also like communities of people that you can be involved with, and there's things like this that you get to do, like to share your experience and meet people that you might not have had the chance to meet. So I think that's just a great way to end off, because I'm very happy to have been on this podcast. And I just, like you and I talked about, like, this is a year in the making. You know, you had talked about this idea a year ago. And then when I got your email about, you know, wanting to be on the first episode, it was just like, right. So it's just, if you let it, aviation can be really enriching beyond just the flying aspect of it.
What tips would you share with someone just starting to explore aviation or aerospace as a hobby, not as a career?
Yeah.
Do you have any?
Yeah,
that come to mind?
I think frequency and recency. Keep flying as much as possible, and don't let long periods of go, especially in your training. If you go in your training, you take a lesson and then you go 6 weeks later, you're going to wind up taking the same lesson you just took 6 weeks ago. You're going to crawl
You're not going to
forward.
advance very fast.
Yeah, I mean, as an early pilot, I think that was a good lesson to learn because I was highly motivated.
Yeah.
So one thing, and secondly, it's just I knew that good progress can be made with a lot of practice, and just keep it recent so that you're learning something significant, new every time, and not going back and kind of have to relearn what you maybe learned a while back. Sometimes that's difficult. That's an easy thing to say and think, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do it. But then there's money. It costs a lot of money to train.
Yeah.
So that can be a factor.
Sometimes you have to get loans or a student line of credit or different things like that just to get through training.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in the early years with student pilot and pilot, you've got private pilots, you have weather factors. So if the weather's bad, then they can hold you back. So if you have an opportunity, take it.
Yeah.
Take it. If you really want to move and get your license relatively quickly.
Okay.
Other than that, I would say the second little tip would be to take Mercedes' advice. Expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
Be open-minded and be flexible, because stuff's going to happen along the way, and you got to be ready and don't freak out. Just
absolutely
listen to your training. Let that training instinct take over.
What would be some advice that you would give to someone that would be interested in becoming a flight attendant today?
My advice would be look forward to an adventure. Every flight will be different, which is kind of nice. Prepare yourself by perhaps studying another language.
Yeah.
I think that would be very important. Take care of yourself. Practice dealing with people. I think it's getting more difficult for a lot of young people. Knowing how to deal with people face to face. So I think that's important. People skills, very important. Study some geography. Make sure you know a little bit of
that could help.
What the world is, where places are. I think that would be very important. And just have a very positive attitude. And like people, of course. You have to like people.
Yeah, it's a little hard if you don't like people and you have to interact with them face to face every single day.
That would be hard. But I think anyone that would apply would have to like more than just travel. I think they would have to like dealing with people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you have any advice for someone who is interested in having a greater purpose to their flying? What should they be thinking about?
Yeah, I would say, get to know somebody in the organization, and maybe if you can find somebody who's like a mentor and can kind of show you the ropes and understand kind of what it is you're dealing with, what the protocols are, so you're not going in just like trying to figure it out yourself. Because I didn't really feel like I got a lot of guidance in that regard.
Okay, that's very interesting.
From the organization itself. I got it from my buddy who had been
in the organization, but not directly from the organization.
Yeah, I didn't need it. I mean, I imagine if I were to call them, I would say, I'd say, hey, I need some guidance here. What do I need to know before I take my first flight? And I didn't really need that because I had him. So I'm not trying to be critical of the organization at all. In fact, I thought the organization was great. They're wonderful people. These people, all volunteers, and just, they're just, from the top down, bottom up, they're just really, you could tell their hearts and passion is in it. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
What advice would you give someone interested in aviation? Whether as a career or a hobby or somewhere in between, like yourself?
I think it is an amazing opportunity as a career. I felt like I was past the point I could have chosen it as a career. Unless I could have gone to work for a company who had their own corporate airplane, which in the U.S. is much more common for them to have one of their employees fly their corporate airplanes rather than having a full-time pilot on standby. So I think it's such an interesting career because there's nothing much like it that's the same. It grows you as a person. Because when you consider how few people ever get a pilot's license and then an instrument rating and then a twin engine rating and then go beyond, we're a very small percentage. And you look back, it's been a lot of fun. And so I would encourage any young person to give it consideration. I think the challenge in 2025 versus when I did it in 1980 is certainly the cost.
Yep, the dollar.
And going to school, I can't even begin to imagine what the bills run up if you're going to be trained professionally like that. Although I would highly recommend it, because I think especially from a training point of view, from the ground school, even to your flight training, it's at a different level that I'm not saying you can't get it at a local airport, but it's much more difficult. It depends on the quality of the people at the local airport. But I feel like there's a little higher standard when you go at a university level.
Yeah.
As a hobby, it has been one of the funnest things I've ever done. And I will say that it does require the resources. I was able to do it because of my business.
Right.
But then I was flying very expensive aircraft that cost a lot of money to maintain. If I could have just had a little single engine, whatever's popular today. I mean, there's so much to do. Even a nice little Cirrus, but those are not inexpensive anymore. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, for us at our day, if you could get into a 172 or Warrior, then you thought that was the cat's meow. But today, there are a lot of nice little single engine.
There's some great ones.
Aircraft. So it's something that will just, I think, gives you the opportunity to just grow as a person. Mm-hmm. So don't be afraid of it. And give it some thought. But the careers now, I would say, after being around for 45 years and working at a university level, excuse me.
Yeah, go for it.
The careers, right now, they can't find enough pilots. So from my career point of view, I don't know how many years that's going to last, but so many pilots are retiring. Mm-hmm. Like all my friends
generation.
Yeah, it's a generational thing. And I already know I've heard numbers of, hundreds of thousands of pilots that they're going to be short of. And so it is great opportunity from just a career point of view that you'll be able to do it, that a lot of people, 25 years ago, they got the training, but then it was very difficult.
It was hard to get in.
A lot of hours and be fortunate, especially in Canada, but it's a wonderful, wonderful career.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's not, I don't know, growing up, that was never even on anybody's radar to even advise me to do that. But I think the days have changed. Mm-hmm. And the best thing you do, go take that free flight and see if you like it.
Take that fan flight.
The fan flight, exactly. So.
And then do you have one piece of wisdom for anyone who is a pilot or learning to become a pilot?
Yeah, the thing that I think in the back of my mind, I've always lived by this rule, and that's to make sure that you don't let your ego really get ahead of your skill set. Mm. It's really easy to do. Mm-hmm. The preparation and being, situation awareness, and now not allowing yourself to get into a situation that you just can't get out of. And it can happen very quickly when you're up there.
Yep.
And you always think you always have the ability to do anything. And guess what? You don't. And as much fun as it is, it's still, you take a risk. And so I think having the patience, having the personality, having the training, I just think the training for me, that was the greatest gift I got, was good
sounds
training.
Like you had amazing training.
Yeah, and I think that the thing that I probably didn't understand the most was weather, and how that becomes the most important thing as a pilot. You're so worried about your skills, but it's always weather. Every single person I ever known that's got into trouble, it's been because of weather. Mm-hmm. And so understanding weather, understanding the risk and the potential, how to avoid it. I mean, there's a reason why commercial airplanes fly 1,000 miles to go around a thunderstorm. And somehow as I've known some guys who think, oh, I can fly through that in a little single engine airplane. So no, those, and never lose the joy. Once you lost the joy, then go on to something else. And so those are just a few things that run through my head.
Yeah. So what advice would you give a young woman interested in the aviation career, either from helicopter to any single area in the industry? What advice would you give her?
Okay, my advice, because I've been out of the aviation industry for so long, but my advice to young women has always been the same. It's funny, when I talk to young women, I start by saying, never forget how far we've come or how far we have to go. At some point, you will be dumped on, criticized, spat upon many times. You have to learn to deal with that and just get up and keep going. I knew nothing about finances, nothing. You need to take control of your own financial life. It's critically important. And then I mentioned, we spend so much time on our hair and our shoes and our makeup and our clothes and our purses. And you forget one thing. When you open your mouth, you give it all away. Your voice is a bigger presentation of who and what you are. Anything you can ever buy. And the big lesson is, take care of yourself, love. Because if you don't, no one else will. Because the miracle in life will be if you can save yourself.
So, what advice would you give to a young aspiring pilot who is struggling with either type 2 or type 1 diabetes?
The only thing I would say is the requirements that Transport Canada give you mean that you must run your blood sugars higher than is optimal while you're operating the aircraft. So for me at middle age, that's not a big deal. But if you're 18 and you want to start flying now,
right,
are you prepared for an entire career to run your blood sugars higher than is medically optimal at the times you're at work?
Interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
If you are, then go for it, because there's nothing that's going to stop you. There's, as long as you look after your diabetes, it's not going to become an issue. The problem becomes, if you're going to do it for the next 40 years, are you prepared to do that? Because having elevated blood sugars for an extended period of time can give you other medical problems.
Okay, I didn't know that.
They are not insurmountable. They are not guaranteed, but there is a possibility that you may have problems with small blood vessel damage, so eyes, kidneys, neuropathy in the feet and hands. Those things all come from a life or a long period of uncontrolled blood sugars.
Okay.
If you're going to run with a higher level of higher blood sugars for a career, you have to make sure it's worth it to you.
Right.
The diabetes won't affect your flying if you look after yourself, but you just want to make sure that you understand that you're going to have a career's worth of slightly less than optimal blood glucose management when you're at work. If you can live with that, go for it.
Well, that's some pretty good advice.
Yeah, and with anything else, there's challenges that come up in life for everybody. They're not necessarily insurmountable. You may have to work hard, but
yep. Hey, you helped me with my own thyroid problem, so
yeah,
it was a season.
Yeah, so there are options available and people to talk to see if you really want to get there.
So then, for young listeners who have been inspired by this conversation and your story and are eager to break into aviation or aerospace science, what advice would you give them to stay curious and navigate those challenges pursuing such an ambitious career?
Yeah, I think the answer goes back to, just anything a parent would tell your kid. Don't be afraid. Make mistakes. And by every stretch of the imagination, ask, talk, seek help, find mentorship, and fall forward, get up, and go some more. I drop back to this again, but I absolutely remember how awkward it was the first couple flights I took to get my private.
Really?
Yeah. It's I didn't know that you could actually touch the propeller.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean,
Hey, but I mean,
I don't know.
nobody knows
Yeah.
until you go into, like you said, nobody knows how to be in a hangar until that first
Yep.
flight, that first FAM flight,
Yep.
getting to talk with a flight instructor.
Yep.
You don't know anything. So that's a very interesting. I didn't think about that.
And we all have our limitations. And again, I remember distinctly one of my first lessons. The instructor said, "Put the numbers right over the top of the cowling, and that's how you'll know that you're where you're supposed to be coming in for a landing." I did that. I swear I did that. But nobody realized that I'm 4 inches taller than my instructor. All right? And
Seat adjustment.
so all of that stuff became, okay, now we're learning, now we're understanding, and we can again sort of get to the point where we solve the problems one by one over the long course of the endeavor.
What advice would you give to aspiring pilots or someone considering a career in the Canadian Armed Forces aviation based on your own unconventional path? And that also includes the family aspect, career. What advice would you give them?
I mean, I think the easiest, shortest answer I could possibly give someone is never make the same mistake twice. And like, yeah,
very good advice.
It's pretty simple. It's on the nose. But I always remind myself of that, if I make a mistake, like mistakes are going to happen. The hardest part is being able to get up from that mistake, be humble about it, accept it. And I think personally, having a culture, like we have a good work culture where if you make a mistake, you're open about it. You tell your peers that, hey, I made this mistake, right? I owned it. Here's what I think I did wrong and why I did it, right? And here's what we can do maybe to improve that. Or it's just, I made a stupid mistake in the moment. There's no kind of cultural issue that needs to be addressed. Just, this was on me, but I'm going to stand up and say that I am not infallible. And I think that's vitally important for everybody, right? Is one of the courses that I went on that I unfortunately didn't get the qualification for reasons outside of my control. So it wasn't just me not being competent enough, but one of the mottos of that course, that qualification, is to be humble, credible, and approachable. And
wow, that's impactful.
And it's great because this is also the course itself and the qualification, if anything, comes with the opposite of being humble. It's literally a badge that says you are like the definitive expert in this field of military aviation. So what they remind you constantly though is that if you're on that, when you have that badge, you still have to be super humble about saying, I don't know everything, right? If you come to me with a question and I don't know, the question isn't, I don't know, and that's stupid. The answer is going to be, I don't know, and let's go look it up together, right? And as part of that, you need to be as approachable, which means you have to just be a generally likable individual. That is part of that humbleness of just engaging with people, asking what's going on, and just listening, right? Making sure that you are still there, just taking part in the greater picture. So that always sticks me. And the credibility part is super important, right? Is you're always learning. You're always opening up books. You're always trying to find something new to kind of wrap your brain around. And I try to take that pretty seriously by always, even if it's just reopening like the aircraft operating instructions again for the 70th time, and just rereading passages where it's like, I haven't looked up the automation section in a while. I should just relearn that just to make sure I'm not missing anything, because it's a pretty tricky section and not everybody's super swept up on it. So why don't I just go and spend 30 minutes or an hour just rereading this section, take a few notes and just kind of ingrain that into your brain. So whether it's doing that or sitting down and learning something entirely new that maybe your immediate group of peers isn't super swept up on, so that you can become an expert on it, like that's going to serve everybody in the long run. So having that general approach to like life and training is good. So from an advice perspective, yeah, don't make the same mistake twice. Humble, credible, approachable is a great attitude to take with everything that you can going forward. Listen, ask questions. But I guess always get up after that mistake. That's the thing. You haven't failed until you stopped. So.
Oh, that's a perfect little soundbite right there. You haven't failed until you stop. That's so true.
Yeah.
Getting back up again.
Yeah. So that's really it. I've made tons of mistakes. I'm free to admit to all of them. I tried to start the aircraft without hydraulics one time, which makes an awful noise and could potentially hurt it. So,
wow.
And that's because I was going through the checklist too quickly. Right. I thought I was absolutely the fastest starter in the West, and I was blasting through the checklist for the 4th or 5th time that day. We were doing a bunch of maintenance work, so it was just constantly turning the aircraft on, turned off, verify a bunch of things. Yep. And I was blasting through checklist, and I just missed one line of the checklist that said, hydraulic ground pump. Missed it. Go to engage the aircraft, and all you hear is just rock hard actuators just against the blades. That really doesn't sound pleasant. So that kind of ruined the rest of the day. The aircraft was fine, but it still required a good, semi-lengthy inspection that just generated more work for the tech that I didn't need to generate. So, making mistakes like that and being able to admit to it is important. And then you just learn and grow from it. So now when I read a checklist, it is every single time we stop. If I'm going too quickly, I go back, read over the lines I just went through, verify that it's there. I've inserted breaks and pauses into my checklist where I stop and I look over every single aspect of the aircraft to make sure it's exactly what it needs to be at that point because of that. So, and I tell all the co-pilots I fly with why I do this, what lessons they can learn from that. And that's it. It's like to be open, share all that, and admit to my failings, of which there are many failings. So it's just constantly learning and
no pilot
growing.
has ever been without a failing. I hope you really enjoyed this episode of Skyward, recapping on the best advice from 2025 from our various guests, from pilots to a flight attendant and NASA's very first funded scientist. I am very excited for what 2026 has in store, so thank you so much for those of you who have been part of the journey from the very beginning, and to those of you who have come along the way. I really appreciate your support, and I'm so glad that you're here. With that, I hope you had a very Merry Christmas and that you have a very happy New Year. Remember to fly high, dream big, and I'll see you in 2026.